Okay, Kritika, we are live.
Okay. Hi everyone. Namaste. Myself Kritika Goyal, and I welcome you all to this meeting of Young Indian Theosophists Group. As you all know, in today's meeting, we will be studying the part 2 of chapter 12, that is, Building a Cosmos of the book Ancient Wisdom by Annie Besant. So, let us sit in meditation first of all, and then we'll be doing the universal invocation. So, let us sit in meditation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know is also one with every other. Come back, everyone. Thank you for joining. Our speaker for the day, as you all know, is Brother Dhruva. Brother Dhruva is from Chennai. He is a lawyer by profession and also a radio broadcaster. He joined the DR Theosophical Society in 1998. He's a licensed tour guide. He is an heritage enthusiast and he also does numerology. I request Brother Dhruva to deliver his talk. Over to you, Brother Dhruva.
Namaste to all of you on this lovely Sunday morning. As done in the previous session, I would like to lead this as a discussion and also share with you the chapter and read out some portions as I have marked in this chapter. As you are all aware, this particular chapter forms an introduction on certain aspects of the cosmos. It will be a continuation of what we saw in the earlier session, in the sense that we will be talking about the concept called logos. Logos is a singular of the word logoi, which we mean in plural. Now, the word logoi comes from the ancient Greek philosophy and also seen in early Christian theology. Now, what does this word mean? As I have already explained in the earlier thing, I'll repeat that. The word logos is analogous to a certain sense of reasoning in the human thought process. And this reasoning for the word logos meant that the whole universe had a certain rationality in its creation, that there was a spiritual principle towards this existence, and reality, and that the whole thing had a certain power behind it, which we call as God or the soul of the universe. And this was not born merely out of providence. One theory is it's providence. Another theory is that it had certain purpose, and a certain purpose was being achieved through this entire process of creation. So that is what this entire logos is. Now, once again, and I said this theory is a certain purpose. On one side of it, we see that a certain providence. Also, when I say providence, I mean wastefulness. Yes, in a sense, it also sounds wasteful, but we do not know why. And that is the mystery which we will be delving into as to why. And we go into the transcendent nature of the divine mind. So with that introduction, we will be going into this chapter. One thing about this chapter, as we have already seen, is that this chapter is more of an introduction to various religious forms from an internal and an external perspective. And we'll be seeing it from a very, very topical level. We're not going into that depth of it, but just from a very topical level of what various religions have to say on certain aspects. Now, to begin with, I will like to share the screen. But before I share the screen, I'd like to say that this chapter by Annie Besant, or rather this introduction by Annie Besant on the various thought processes of the logos involves the Taoistic thought, famous Taoism philosopher of China. It involves the Zoroastrian thought, the Kabbalah school, the Judaic school, the ancient Egyptian school of philosophy, then the Greek school of philosophy, which had famous mathematicians like Pythagoras, Plato, Neoplatonic thought, and then the Vedic and the Upanishadic thought, and that is later on influenced by the Buddhist and the Sankhya school of philosophy, and to the latest and the modern thinking of the Gnostic and the Christian philosophies. So in this chapter, you will see how Annie Besant has covered various schools of philosophy. In effect, it fits into the second objective of Theosophical Society on the comparative study of various schools of religion and thought process and philosophy, and based on various schools understanding how we arrive at a certain commonality. The whole thing is arriving at a certain commonality and seeing that we all can survive at a common plane. We all have a certain common thinking process. Rather, the whole world had a common thinking process at some point of time. And how we as a modern human race is able to set aside our differences and come to a certain unity in our thinking process. So with that, I'd like to share the screen. So let's get to share the screen here. Do I get to share this? I'm not able to. Yeah, wait, I just share this. Yes. I hope you're able to see my screen now.
Yes, sir.
Super. So one of the interesting aspect is the unity underlying all religions as these subtopic fields. And as Annie Besant says, right thought is necessary to right conduct, right understanding to right living, and the divine wisdom. And in the ancient Sanskrit word, it was called as the Brahma Vidya. In the modern Greek name, we call it as Theosophia. And of course, Theosophy comes to this world in this manner, and that's how the Theosophical Society also comes into existence in the study of this Brahma Vidya or this ancient thought process. So here she goes on to talk about certain elementary schools. But one thing which she makes is interpretations. And interpretations of various concepts, interpretation of what religion is all about. And this interpretation of religion is an interesting portion which I thought I will share from this chapter. I will read it out, and when I read it out, you will see this is something which the rational thinkers of the 19th century had taken this very seriously. And if you see the communist movement of the 19th and the early 20th century, it all worked on just this particular thought process. Whereas they conveniently thought of ignoring certain other interpretations. So we will read this passage of Annie Besant. She says that some allege that religions have grown up on the soil of human ignorance, tilled by imagination, and have been gradually elaborated from crude forms of animism and fetishism. And their likeness are referred to universal natural phenomena, imperfectly observed and fancifully explained. Solar and star worship being the universal key for one school, phallic worship the equally universal factor for another, fear, desire, ignorance, and wonder led the savage to personify the powers of nature. And the priest played upon his terrors, his hopes, his misty fancies, his bewildered questionings. Myths became scriptures and symbols facts, and their basis was universal, and the likeness of products was inevitable. So so this is exactly what the rational thinkers like Karl Marx and Engels. Karl Marx was one of the the geniuses of the modern era, and this is his thought process to a large extent. And she was just referring to these thought processes. So this is one school of interpretation, what religion meant for us. And as Karl Marx said, religion is the opium of the masses. This was where, people were exploiting one's ignorance, and various schools were just being bunched together. And then, you were just trying to make a kishmish of the whole thing. So that was one school of thinking in the 19th century. Another school of thinking which came out of this was a second explanation, which is the common property in religions, and the world asserts the existence of an original teaching in the custody of a brotherhood of great spiritual teachers. And this, she says, was the outcome of various cycles of evolution. There have been guides and instructors, and the human race has been, imparting knowledge based on certain fundamental truths of religion in the form most adapted to the idiosyncrasies of the recipients. And according to this view, the founders of the great religions are members of the one brotherhood and were aided in their mission by many other members lower in their degree. And she said the whole process of initiates and disciples were basically with people who had an eminence in spiritual insight, in philosophical knowledge, and purity of ethical wisdom. And these guided the infant nations, gave them polity, enacted their laws, ruled them as kings, taught them as philosophers, and guided them as priests. All nations of antiquity looked back to such mighty men, demigods, and heroes, and they left their traces in literature, architecture, and legislation. So here is coming an entirely diametrical opposite view, saying that you can positively look at this. On one side, you have people who are making use of people's ignorance and typifying them and exploiting them. On another side, you also see a lot of knowledge being brought out of it, philosophical knowledge, and a lot of books and scriptures coming into existence. And when you go into the essence of these scriptures, you see something fabulous and something very great, and a certain identity across various civilizations start to emerge in this process of study. So this is the origin of all religion, and as I said, here we will be dealing with various schools of philosophy in this process. In this process, the most important thing is certain spiritual verities of religion. So there are 5 points which he talks about. Rather, she summarizes the whole thing, the 5 points, on spiritual aspects of various religions. And one is the eternal, infinite, incognizable real existence of the so-called power. I mean, you can call it God, you can call it an infinitesimal source of energy, you can call it anything you want. You can call it a damn fool also. You know, I mean, I'm of the view that you can call it anything that you want. But the recognition is, or the admission here is, it is something that is eternal, something that is infinite, something that is incognizable in its existence. And from that, the manifested God and the unfolding of unity into duality and to the Trinity. So you have this concept of God coming into existence, and from a certain unity to a duality. When I say duality, it is first only God existed, then it's his creation, so God and his creation, and the Trinity. The next is the other aspects of his creation. So 3 things: God, his creation, the other aspects of his creation. So from this manifested Trinity is a certain spiritual intelligence and a guiding cosmic order. This guiding cosmic order is what we call as a logos, which we are discussing today. Okay? And man is a reflection of this manifested God. Therefore, the Trinity fundamentally and his inner and real self-being is eternal, one with the self of the universe. And lastly, the inference is this evolution of repeated incarnations into which he is drawn by desire and from which he is set free by knowledge and sacrifice, becomes divine in his potency as he's ever been divine in agency. Now, we need to understand these 5 concepts before we go ahead. Am I making myself clear? We need to understand these 5 concepts. One, as I said earlier, is this eternal, infinite, incognizable, real existence of God. And this is something even which the Upanishads say, the Vedic faith also talks about. God is something which we just cannot understand. He's omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. It's an energy which is the source of this entire universe. And taking it one step further, the source of this entire multiverse. Because today, the later theories talk about multiple universes which coexist parallelly, what we call parallel universes, in different spaces of time, energy, and matter. Some may exist in matter, some in antimatter, So we are talking about parallel universes that exist. And this is what we call as a string theory, which has come to dominate over the past half a century. And let us also understand a lot of these inferences which Annie Besant and the Theosophical movement has come to summarize that we are reading came into existence in the 19th century. And in the 19th century, a lot of this was based on the then known scientific concepts, on the then accepted scientific concepts. Theosophy, for its recognition, had to admit and accept science. And this is something which we see in all these talks of HPB and thereof Colonel Olcott and also of Annie Besant, some of the earliest founders of the society. They never went against science. They accepted many scientific truths as and when it was revealed to mankind. Because the human brain has been evolving, and especially the Industrial Revolution has brought out many scientific facts and truths, and they kept on accepting that and accommodating them into the knowledge of the past. So our entire thing is accommodating and expanding our understanding and knowledge of this universe. Today, we take it one step further. Not just the universe, it is not unitary, but it's multipolar or multidimensional. We call it multiverse. So, Annie Besant's philosophy or Annie Besant's teachings cannot be fitted into pigeon holes. It is organic. My interpretation is that it has to keep evolving with time. It is not fixed. Our interpretations, our thought process evolves with time. And in this process, one, we understand, certain inferences are one, we understand that the creator, this eternal power is something which we are trying to understand and is incognoscible. A. And from that comes in two things, a duality and a trinity. When I say duality, we talk about this power and this power creating something that is these creations, and the trinity, the aspects of it. Now, once again, the trinity is part and parcel of God itself. We are just trying to divide it to comprehend certain aspects of creation. And from this is Trinity. In our comprehension, we talk about spiritual intelligence and a guiding cosmic order called as the Logos. Because we feel that the whole creation of the multiverse, the entire Manavantras that we were talking about, and the various parallel universe cannot be a joke. In one aspect of Hindu philosophy, we call it a Leela. We refer it as the Maya in the Buddhist philosophies. But in a certain sense, in the Western philosophy, they say there is a certain seriousness to this whole thing. It need not be considered as a Maya, maybe a Maya, but there is a seriousness to this whole thing. There is no game over here, but there's something that is there. There's an objective there. We do not know what the objective is. We can only think that there's an objective. A presumption that there is an objective. What is that objective is still a mystery. And that we'll come to it later. Now, thereupon is this man's reflection of the manifested God, that man is a creation in this Trinity. And man is looking at God. Now, let us understand one thing. Before I go ahead, let me break it down to some. Where does the concept of God come from? God is a creation of man. Would I be right in saying that? Now, it is a debatable subject. But I will support that statement that God is the creation of man, because when we admit that there's a scientific process of the creation of the universe, let us admit that there was one phase where we had the dinosaurs which ruled this planet. Now, where was the concept of God for the dinosaurs? They didn't have a concept of God. They never had this concept of Trinity. They never had the concept of spiritual intelligence. And yet, these animals ruled the world, even before man came into existence. For millions of years, these animals have ruled the world. So where was the question of God and all this creation when they were ruling the world? So, no, these are all highly debatable subjects, so we'll not go into that. And next comes the evolution of repeated incarnations. This is the most important aspect, the last aspect that we'll be dealing with in this whole thing, is that the evolution of repeated incarnations into which man is drawn by desires. Man is always stuck up in this process of having a desire and fulfilling that desire. Every one of us has a certain desire, and we want to fulfill that desire. And in this process, we are caught in a loop. I want this, and I need to work for this. I want this, I need to work for this. And I want this, I need to work for this. Of course, if I say I don't have desires, then I'm saying I'm not being ambitious. So the question is, are you being ambitious if you don't have desires? Which is once again very debatable. So these are various aspects of the human thought process. But one thing which all these spiritual learning makes us understand this whole process is this. When you have a certain knowledge of the divine and you see the fallacy in this whole never-ending cycle of need and want, you break that cycle. And when you break that cycle, a certain divinity is manifested within you. And this is what the Buddha says, as you reach the point, or you strive to reach the point of attaining a nirvana. You break that cycle of need and want and desire and reach a point where you don't need anything. And then you are in the path of progressing to be a free person. So that is one way of looking at it. So now with this thought process, I will make a stop here, and I'd like to open this up for discussion, and then we will proceed on what various schools of philosophy talk about this thought process. I said 5 important points here. These 5 important points. So we are going to discuss these, what various schools of philosophy talk on these 5 points. That's all. The next half hour, we'll be only going to see what the various schools of philosophy talk about this. So before I go on to that, I want you all to be in sync with me in this. Are you in sync with me? Can somebody tell me if I'm boring or if what I'm saying is stupid?
No, it is perfectly going fine. Yesterday, me and Kritika were discussing on certain things, like we keep an abstract thing sometimes without any agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday, something very interesting, similar to this occurred to us.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, we started talking about multiple beliefs and multiple religions, Christianity, then Muslims thinking about certain things. There are some rituals, there are some philosophies, scientific approach. So we concluded after this discussion, it was a short one. Wherever we start, we will reach that one point. I mean, that is what we know through the discussion. That was the only thing. Whoever is starting from wherever, whichever path we are taking. So this one internal infinity real existence, people have started actually experiencing through various forms. Right, Kritika? That's what we discussed. And probably from there, when we, the very eternal truth or existent manifest takes different forms, different ideas, people and incidents. The very thought takes the form of people, the very thought takes the form of ideas, form of incidents.
Yes.
And that's what we experienced yesterday.
Excellent. Very beautifully put across, Evelina. And now in this process of arriving at an inference, where you choose to arrive at an inference, you arrive at an inference of acceptance. Now, I can also arrive at an inference where I refuse to accept. So, the theosophical objective is to arrive at an inference where we can all live together, despite our different upbringings, despite our differences in various thought process, but we try to arrive at some common minimum acceptable way of living. And for that common minimum acceptable way of living, we have to arrive at some inference of these philosophies. Now, once again, this is our agenda. There are other people who have different agendas. For instance, taking a step away from theosophy, when you talk about politics, political parties have their agendas. So there, they don't want to unite people. There, they want to highlight the differences and live out of those differences. And if you look at today's world, not just India, I'm not pointing a finger at any particular country, but across the world, every political party always wants to highlight the differences between various societies, create fissures, divisions, and highlight this so that they get people to rally around them. Because it's a vested interest, the vested interest is to come to power and control the society the way they want to do it. Am I right? And is there any?
I believe that it's not about political party, because it is that the seed was inserted much before. We created differences, so then some of us pointed out those differences and took, फायदा उठाया basically उन चीजों का. So it is us only who have created those differences, because one of those movies, PK, if you must have watched it, so it's like thappa kahan hai.
I didn't follow that.
Oh, I believe that there should be no religion, no Hinduism, no Sikhism. It should be humanism.
Yes. Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what we would like to see.
Because at the end, we are going, the moment we die, we all have to, we will be converted and we will be mixed in the soil only.
Exactly. So when we die and go, we don't take our religion with us.
Exactly.
It remains on planet Earth. We don't know what the future is. And that is what the whole comparative study is all about, Birth and the future. Some faiths believe that there is a future. Some faiths just don't know about it, just don't talk about it. But most of them come to a common thing that if you do good, then you have something good ahead of you. If you do bad, then obviously there's something bad ahead of you. So, you can't expect to do bad and then expect to have something good thereafter. No. So it's a cycle. It's as simple as I said the earlier time also. If you're going to cut off all the trees, obviously you're going to have a drought. But if you're going to plant more trees, you're going to reap the benefit of having those trees over there. So that is the basic logical path which most faiths have taken, most civilizations have taken. So if you do good, you will have a better future. And if you do good in this life, the next life will also be of something useful for you. So that is how these various, the original interpretation starts to come. Now here you have various thought processes like that of the Mongolians and the lost continent of Atlantis. Now, the lost continent of Atlantis, all this is just theories. We're not going into that, but these are debatable ones. So also the one called Lemuria. Now, these concepts were brought in sometime in the middle of the 19th century, especially about Lemuria, and then by the late 19th century, all of this was disproved. So whatever evidence was given about Lemuria was disproved in the 19th century itself. So let's not get into that. But certain things which were interesting, which the Theosophical Society in its studies found very, very interesting, was from Taoism, the Chinese philosopher Taoist. And in this, it is said that he is represented as a worker of miracles, as addicted to intemperance and very eccentric in his ways. When shipwrecked on one occasion, he emerged from beneath the water with his clothes unwet and walked freely on the surface. And finally, he ascended to the sky in a bright day. So this is Taoism on how they represent the founder of the Taoist philosophical movement, and he was also of the Wu dynasty. Now, in this, you will also see a connect with the resurrection of Christ. There is a mild connect the resurrection of Christ. So you see different civilizations around the same period of the second century or the second and third century had a certain philosophy of a person coming and then having to do something, and then there was a resurrection, a kind of resurrection. So this is one particular inference that you can see. But the best part of this Taoism was that the great Tao had no bodily form. It produced and nourishes heaven and earth. The great Tao has no passions. It caused the sun and the moon to revolve as they do. Great Tao has no name, but it affects the growth and maintenance of all things. Now, this is what we talk about God. The great Tao means, the Chinese thing is nothing but God. So what is God? So God, as it says, nourishes heaven and earth. The manifest God has no passions. It causes the sun and moon to revolve as they do, because that is the beginning of the universe for us, or the solar system. And it has no name, but it affects the growth and maintenance of all things. Now, this is exactly what you would see in the Vedic philosophy or in the Advaitic philosophy. The Advaitic philosophy also will talk about something similar to this, very similar understanding. And interestingly, Taoism has got this thing called two forms, the pure and the turbid. And he says, heaven is pure and earth is turbid. So this is where you start seeing later interpretations. Now, let me tell you one thing. When the person first comes out with a particular faith, or when a faith is born, we see across the spectrum, be it Christianity, be it Taoism, be it the Upanishads or the Vedic philosophy, or be it various other, or be it Buddhism or the Sankhya school of philosophy, be it Judaism or Zoroastrianism. In the initial growth phase, we see all of them have this thing. They all have a certain similar. Can you see me? Can you see my mouse going around this? Hello?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
So all the philosophies have this particular thing in their inference. But later on, as the movement or the faith or the religion comes into existence, a lot of categorization starts to come into being. Every faith, as it starts to grow bigger and bigger, categorization starts coming into it. a certain hierarchy starts coming into it. And when the hierarchy comes, you see this difference coming in. You see of what is pure and turbid. So they say God is pure, or the heaven is pure, earth is turbid. So what God is, He's pure. His creation, the so-called duality, I am different from God, I am not pure. In a sense, we are justifying to say that that is clean. I'm not clean. I strive to be clean like that. I admit that I'm not perfect. I strive to achieve that perfection. And that perfection is God. So this is a later evolution of that thought process in any school of philosophy. And then you find a further distinction which comes into play, the masculine and the feminine. So this is a further thing which comes into existence, the masculine and the feminine. So as every religion starts to evolve, you see more and more concepts start to evolve, and categorizing starts coming into the play, a hierarchy starts coming into play. And this is something which we see in all philosophies. And yet they end up in saying this, the originator of the heaven and earth, having a name, is the mother of all things. Under these two aspects, it is really the same. But as development takes place, it receives the different names. Together, we call them mystery. It's interesting as to how various faiths arrive at this thing called the mystery. And this is an interesting study, which which I got to understand only when I started reading this chapter in depth. Not the first time when I read it, but maybe the second time when I read this chapter, that I got to understand it completely. Now, there's another school of philosophy called the students of the Kabbalah, or the Kabbalah was another ancient school of philosophy. And there, once again, they talked about something that is undefined. We're talking about God, or the so-called divine existence. As I said, you can call it God, you can call it a damn fool, you can call it a stone, but it is what we call as a divine power. And there they look at this as something that's undefined, complete, coming into existence before heaven and earth, how still it was, and formless, standing alone, undergoing no change, reaching everywhere, and in no danger of being exhausted. It may be regarded as the mother of all things. You see, Taoism also calls it the mother of all things. The Kabbalah also calls it the mother of all things. I do not know its name. I give it the designation of the Tao, making an important effort of its name. I call it the Great. Great, it passes on and it flows, passing on. So another interesting thing. And then we see the Hindu literature, or rather the Vedic philosophy, which says all things under heaven sprang from it as existence. That existence sprang, it is non-existence and there's no name. That is, in other words, we're talking about the Advaitic philosophy, where the Advaitic school of philosophy talks about this particular thing, and the universe is still a mystery in many Hindu or many ancient literature of our country. Now, next we go on to talk about the Logos, or the Trinity. Now, the Trinity is something which you see in Taoism. You see this coming into the ancient Egyptian thinking process. The Trinity comes into the Judaic concepts, and then into Greek and into Christian concept also. So, and the word Trinity comes much, much later, but it's just described as three different things. The Tao said one produced, two produced, one produced two, two produced three. So that's how the ancient Chinese call it. They didn't call it Trinity. They just call it Tao produced one, one produced two, two produced three. today's world, in Christian philosophy, we call it Trinity. God created man and his creations, and that in turn had certain aspects or certain attributes, and so we call it God, Son, and the Holy Ghost is what we call it. So, three different things that we call it. And here he goes on to embrace the brightness while they are harmonized in the breadth of it. So, breadth of space is something we talk about as what we call, well, they call the breadth of space, what we call as a prakriti, or we call as existence of this pervading whole space, this prakriti. And all pervading is the great Tao. We call it prakriti. It may be found on the well, we'll not go into these details, but I would like to move on. But this is all, by the way, from the 4th century BC, as this particular topic talks about. One thing is one of the theosophers, Mr. Legge, says man is regarded as a trinity, recognizing him in spirit, the mind, and the body. And this division comes out clearly in the classic of purity, in the teaching that man must get rid of the desire to reach with the one. So this is one thought process in the Theosophical Society where Mr. Legge has given an interpretation to this concept of Trinity as to why it came into existence. Now, we still do not know why the so-called Trinity theory was formed, but as I said, in the evolution of every faith, the beginnings are simple and humble, and then you come to a point. Yes, you have something to say.
Oh no, yes, I just this. Oops, what happened?
Yeah. No, you had raised your hands.
No, I raised my hand to share something, and looks like, how am I? Spotlight, remove pen. Okay, yeah. So since you just said no that it's not known how or why this Trinity concept came in process. Actually, it also has a scientific basis. And see, I would just like to share one slide on this. That why is it always Trinity and not duality or four or something? Can I just stop your sharing?
Yeah. Please, please.
Okay, here if you see this Trinity, you see in different religions. So Hindu, Christian, Hebrew, Egyptian, Zoroastrian, Scandinavian, Druidic, Phoenician, and made some of the religions. So the reason for this is, see, the Tao is the unmanifested state, the Parabrahma or the immutable principle. Okay, it is in Hindi because I made it for a Hindi talk, but why Trinity? And the top, you can see the circle, it's like the Avyakt, unmanifested, the Tao. Unmanifested principle, immutable principle. Like zero, it is also called Shunya, zero. But whenever anything manifests from the unmanifest, it has to be three. It cannot be otherwise. Why? Because if you see the zero, when it becomes manifest, it can be divided into plus and minus charges. Like if we take neutral charge, there is no charge, right? It is unmanifest or zero. But if we divide, somehow we divide the charges, we make plus and minus. Of course, when plus and minus come together, they become neutral, again zero. But when plus and minus are separated, they become manifest, like we use in the electricity. But here again, the same plus and minus are named as Purush Prakriti or consciousness, matter, spirit matter, Shiva, Shakti, etc. Different names given. But these are still the two. Where is the third one? The third one is their mutual interaction, the interrelation between the two. Because without their relation, the process cannot happen. Okay. So that's why all these three are from anything that will express from unmanifest to manifest, it will be in 3. Basically, we are, as you said, we are trying to say 1, 2, 3 and to comprehend, but basically it's 1, but at different times it expresses in different ways. So just wanted to share.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Just that I'd like to
And
add.
Who has a doubt?
on a lighter note, the very symbol you shown, no, nothing, the circle, plus and minus, I don't know. I just visualize it as the plus looked like me as a spoke of a wheel. So it is moving.
It is moving.
And that minus looked at me as a log, which is still rest. As Dhruva said, no, moving is masculine and rest is feminine.
Yes, same, exactly. And if you see Shivlinga, no, it is actually the Shivlinga is also, that's why you see 1 and 0. So 1 is the Shivlinga and the surrounding that thing is 0. And the same 1 and 0 is used in computers.
Binary, yes.
Binary. So it is so deep in our existence.
Yeah,
that
but the Shivalingam itself is a so-called trinity. It's called the Brahma Bhagam, the Vishnu Bhagam, and the Shiva Bhagam. So
yes.
The whole Shivalinga has got 3 parts to it.
Yeah, so 1 and 0 and they're in, yeah, so that exactly.
There are 3 parts to it there itself.
There
and
itself.
You have a unity which comes in.
Yeah. But it over the period of time, it degraded as different worship, fetish worshipping, and all those things.
No, wait. No, see, once again, we need to understand this. When you see ancient civilizations, I may be making something controversial here, but still, I have to mention this. Many ancient civilizations believed in the concept of fertility. Fertility was very, very important. And it was at a very basic, as the first explanation of which Anibison recorded. You know, people were taking bits and pieces like what Karl Marx did, or the communists or rational thinkers did. They took certain bits and pieces of these things and said the religion was this opium of mankind, dump it, which was what they wanted. That was their agenda. So the primitive of existence of mankind, or the ancient tribes, as we would refer them better, believed that fertility was so important, and for them, everything that controlled our life had to be given its due place in society. The sun, moon, the water, and birth, life in itself was so sacred for them. Because, until 1921, let's accept this fact, the death rate was higher than the birth rate. It is because of modern medicine, things have flipped. If you see, 1921 is called as a demographic year. Why? Because our birth rate is higher than the death rate, and the number of people who have been living in this world is more than the number of people who have been dying. Till 1921, it was the other way around. The death rate was so close to the birth rate that you had to, keep on having more children, and the probability of their existence was very little. Even as late as 1940s, what was the life expectancy of an average Indian? 35 to 40 years. So it was so difficult a life that we were all going through. And these are vital factors in human existence. So
no, but
our entire thinking process is on fertility. And fertility was very, very important for every ancient society. And in that process, the male and female organs were given due respect in society. Nothing perverted about it, but it was given a certain degree of divinity. Everything was given a certain divinity. And that's how the phallic worship comes. And a moral progression of this divinity of phallic worship was our interpretation to this at a higher level. Everything goes from one stage to another. It is a progression of human society.
No, but I beg to differ on this, Dhruva, because you just read. You just read yourself that although there are classes which were. Oh, sorry, Vimalji, you raised your hand first. Sorry, you said. Yeah.
Yes, Vimal.
That doesn't matter. I think you can continue what you're saying, then I will say.
Okay. That you said that they are also assisted by those beings, which are already way above in evolution. So when they have, I mean, Ved Upanishads and this thousands of years, 1920 is just 100 years back. And Upanishads are like thousands of years back, which were written by the initiates of the fifth root race. And so I think when the original teachings like Puranas, if you see, the deep teachings they were not able to give to masses. It was only for the initiates and like Vedanta, okay? But how to convey it to the common masses? So to convey it to the common masses, it was given in the forms of stories, parables, symbolisms, and allegories. So at least a trace of that thought will remain in the mind. Although the secret or the esoteric doctrine existed, we cannot say otherwise how one symbol means at a physical, I mean, very crude level, very base level, very bad, but suddenly that same symbol can be very esoteric. So it means it originated from there. But in common masses, of course, you have all kinds of people, like even the Bhagavad Gita. The message of Bhagavad Gita can be used by a criminal because he will say, I am not killing. The God is killing through me. I am nobody. So, but you cannot say that it originated I mean, that I'm not saying that is my personal understanding, that it was all the way along before there, but due to misunderstanding like masculine and feminine were never meant to be male and female, because the word Purusha was used for the spirit inside, not the male.
It's something like the Ida and Pingala.
Ida and Pingala, exactly. So yeah, and somewhere along the line it was manipulated and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
see, this whole manipulation comes when we are exposing ourselves to different thought processes.
Yeah.
So then we find words to fit it.
So yes.
It becomes easy to fit.
Easy to fit, yeah.
I can call it a plus and minus.
Okay, yeah.
I just call it two opposing forces.
Two opposing forces, yeah.
Simple. So the masculine and feminine was considered to be two opposing forces.
Yeah.
So that was an easy interpretation, which is not perhaps the best.
No, and then it carried over the ages.
But my point of view is this.
Yeah.
An esoteric interpretation or an esoteric understanding doesn't come overnight. An esoteric understanding or esoteric thing of anything evolves over a period of time. And let us accept the fact that, if we are accepting science and evolution, we all came as simple tribes, and then we evolve and evolve and evolve. And as Max Muller says, we have evolved over a period of time. And Max Muller's readings is also one of the important things which the Theosophical Society accepts. And we have evolved over a period of time. Our thinking has evolved, and then we have accommodated everything in society in that process of looking at it. We have not said anything is bad.
Yeah.
We have accepted everything. When we research esoteric, everything below it was accepted. Nothing was considered to be bad. So the whole thing of bad comes from a Christian perspective, from an imperial perspective of the 18th and 19th centuries. That is from an imperial perspective, that my faith is bigger, your faith is poorer, which the Theosophical Society never subscribes to. It is comparative study. We all have to coexist at a point of inference. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So basically, just want to add some thoughts to this discussion. So in the book called the Inner Life, the CWL talks about why does God in the first place evolve this plus and minus? Why does it happen? So what he says is it's impossible to know the mind of that creator. But what he says is it's quite possible that it arose from a desire. And what was that desire? Is he was love and he wanted something to love. So it came from that. And if you look at all our religions, they say that first, one of the things to strive for is desirelessness. Why? Because unless you are without desire, you are not going to go back to that unitary. Because that's the only way. When that unitary loses that desire and it enfolds back into itself, is when everything is over. So that's an interesting thought that one can think about in all this. That's it.
Yeah. Beautifully put. I fully accept this. This is very nicely put. Thanks for that point. Now, I think we have almost come to the end of this whole thing. This whole thing will go on for a long time, I think. Because,
but you know what the good thing is?
Yeah.
I think we have come a full circle, because this introduction in the printed, the soft copy, in the initial we thought it was not there, so it was taken up by, I think, Pradeep in the beginning, and now only I realized when I was looking at the end that introduction is given in the end. So basically we started with the introduction and we are finishing with the introduction.
Okay. So the rest, I think I don't have the time, but I can only say the rest of the whole topic, the next 10 pages or so, is where they are, kind of talking about the various philosophies of Buddhism and Taoism and the Judaic faith, and all of them referring to this particular thing of logos, of creation, the unitary aspect of God, and the so-called duality. Can someone turn off the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So there's various philosophies, and they all talk about it. Interestingly, almost every philosophy that we've seen has spoken about this. So, do I stop here and take it back? How do we proceed on this?
I think, yeah, because, oh, sorry, Kritika, yeah.
No, I think it's time, but if everyone will agree, then we can proceed. Otherwise, we'll stop.
We'll have it on another session if you wish to.
Okay. Actually, yeah, we can have a, no, but we have already the sessions for the April.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can do it later on in the month of May.
Okay. We can find one session. Until then, people also can do some self-study on that.
Some study on this chapter.
Yeah.
The marked portions which I have can be looked at. I have marked various portions of this.
Yeah. Otherwise, we can discuss in the group itself.
Oh, yeah. That is also one good thing.
Yeah, in the group itself we can discuss.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but it was very good to listen to you and bringing all those different perspectives and views to check upon our, as you say, conclusions, or when we reach any conclusions. So what all things to be taken care of. So thank you so much.
So let's proceed. Thank you so much, Brother Dhruva. I open the forum for any further discussion or question and answers, which I think everybody has already done. But still, if anybody is left with any doubt or suggestion.
Or people find it too boring.
Oh, not anything but boring.
Yeah, actually, at a point of time, I was like, "Maza aa raha hai, ruko mat."
So that is why I had to break at the 5 inferences.
Yeah.
Those are the 5 points based on which every society has worked. And those 5 inferences are quite interesting.
Yeah.
So is there anybody else? Vimal ma'am is, I think.
Yeah, basically those 5 inferences are part of the 3 main points of the poem, which is part of the secret doctrine. So it's very important for us to keep thinking about all those things.
Yeah.
Don't undermine that. That is extremely important.
Thank you, Vimal ma'am. So I think we'll proceed because it's already time.
Yeah.
So let us sit in meditation for a minute and absorb all the things we have learned today. ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ Thank you so much, Brother Dhruva, for such an delightful and interesting and interactive session. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. So let's meet next week, same place and same time. Till then, please be safe and enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kritika.
Thank you, Kritika.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dhruva. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Enjoy.
you.
Bye.
Okay.